Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Our goal is to really break down the incredibly complex, super vibrant world of Islam. And we want to look far, far beyond those common media stereotypes you might be used to seeing. We're going to take a structured visual journey through the source material to really understand how massive unity and deep diversity actually coexist within this global faith. So, let's start with a big question. Is the Islam just one homogeneous block? In public discourse, it's so often portrayed as the single, uniform beam of light. But as we're going to see today, when you take that light and pass it through the prism of history, geography, and human interpretation, it refracts. It explodes into this brilliant, diverse spectrum of traditions and everyday lives. All right, here's our agenda for today. We'll start with part 1, Basics of Unity and Diversity. Then 2, Sunnism and Shiism. 3, Law, Spirituality, and Minorities. 4, Lived Everyday Life. And finally, 5, Politics, Media, and Education. Okay, let's dive right into section 1, Basics, Unity, and Diversity. A perfect starting point for us is the concept of the Ummah. The source material defines the Ummah as the global religious community of Muslims. It really establishes our baseline of unity. But, and this is absolutely crucial to take away from this, shared foundational beliefs do not automatically mean identical answers to modern questions. Whether it's about law, gender, mysticism, or just daily life, the Ummah is internally highly, highly diverse. But despite all that immense diversity, there is a very real core unity. Think of these shared beliefs as that pure light entering our prism. We're talking about a belief in one God, the central importance of the Quran, the role of Prophet Muhammad, and shared practices like prayer, fasting, giving alms, and pilgrimage. These central tenets, they connect the Ummah across continents and across centuries. Moving right along to section 2, Sunnism and Shiism. So, demographically speaking, Sunnism represents the clear majority tradition worldwide, while Shiism is the second largest, representing a really significant minority. But demographics are only one part of the story here. What's really fascinating is that the core difference actually lies in their historical perspectives on legitimate religious leadership right after the death of Prophet Muhammad. Historically, the Sunni tradition placed its emphasis on the legitimacy of the early community, the first caliphs, and scholarly consensus. The Shia tradition, on the flip side, placed spiritual and religious authority specifically within the Prophet's family, the Ahl al-Bayt, and a lineage of imams. And to really ground this abstract theology into something concrete, we have to look at the Battle of Karbala in 680 AD. The source texts emphasize that for many Shia communities, Karbala isn't just some distant historical footnote. It emotionally and morally anchors their entire faith. The memory of Prophet Muhammad's grandson, Hussein, being killed there serves as this incredibly powerful, living framework for understanding justice, enduring suffering, and standing resilient against oppression. Let's transition over to section 3, Law, Spirituality, and Minorities. Right at the core of this deeper theological layer is something called fiqh. This is human legal interpretation, and it is so vital to point out that fiqh is a human method, completely separate from divine revelation itself. It's essentially the scholarly attempt to apply religious texts to concrete, everyday situations. Understanding this distinction brilliantly explains why legal opinions historically vary so wildly, because, human contexts vary. Over time, this human interpretation developed into established major law schools, or madhahib. We've got the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali schools within Sunnism and the Jafri school within Shiism. So the really crucial point here is that these law schools are simply different methodical approaches to daily life, like exactly how to pray or how to conduct business. They are definitely not entirely separate religions. But it's not all just law, right? Beyond the legal side, there is the incredible spiritual depth of Islam, captured wonderfully by Sufism. Sufism emphasizes inner purification, love, and closeness to God through practices like dhikr, which is the remembrance of God. And the source material is crystal clear on this. Sufism is not some third sect alongside Sunni and Shia. It's a spiritual practice and tradition found completely interwoven across various branches and regions. And our prism spectrum contains so many more unique colors. We're talking about the Abadiyya in Oman, Alevism in Turkey, or the Ismailism and Zaydism branches of Shiism. Highlighting these ensures we don't accidentally reduce these incredibly rich minority histories to mere footnotes.
They have their own distinct rituals, histories, and questions of recognition that are deeply, deeply important to understanding the full picture of Islam.
All right, let's look at Section 4, Lived Everyday Life and Regions. Because Islam is a truly global religion, the actual everyday practice of the faith looks completely different depending on where you are standing. It weaves beautifully into a bustling Turkish city mosque, a really rhythmic West African Sufi circle, or a multilingual European youth group. The faith naturally adapts itself right into the local language, architecture, and culture. And because it's lived locally, everyday identity is highly individualized. Someone might identify as a cultural Muslim but live a completely secular life. Another might be a devout youth finding their way in a Western diaspora, juggling multiple identities. You just cannot judge a person's individual piety, or their political stance for that matter, simply by outward markers like wearing a headscarf or attending a mosque. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, Politics, Media, and Education. Consider this for a second. A media frame highlights certain aspects and totally hides others. We can use this concept to really deconstruct how political actors and modern media algorithms distort religious diversity into conflict-driven narratives. By focusing strictly on us versus them, complex histories and the peaceful, everyday realities of literally billions of people are pushed completely out of the frame. A perfect example of this is international conflict. Public debates so often label the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia as just a simple Shia versus Sunni religious war. However, our source material impartially explains that these international conflicts are actually driven by state power, national security, resources, and geography. While religious language might definitely be used for mobilization, the root causes are rarely purely theological. So how on earth do we navigate all this? Well, here are 4 clear steps to empower you to look right past those political filters. First, always examine the source context. Second, recognize and question those broad generalizations. Third, meticulously distinguish personal religion from state politics. And fourth, use differentiated language. Ask exactly which group in which region under what specific circumstances. This right here is the absolute core of media literacy. So now that you've seen the full prism, the shared unity of the Ummah, the historical depth of its branches, the human touch of its laws, and the beautiful complexity of its lived realities, you have the real tools to see past the simple headlines. So I'll leave you with this. How are you going to consume news about the Islamic world moving forward? I challenge you to apply this new perspective, ask better questions, and always stay curious. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.